Welcome to this Succeed with Dyslexia webinar. Today I'm going to be catching up with Shae Wissell. My name is Julia Clouter, and Shae, you haven't seen us for a year, but you've had an incredibly busy year, a very pacey year with lots of change in your life. So we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about the work that you've been doing through Dear Dyslexic and finding out the kind of support that you've been giving over the past year. So welcome along. It's lovely to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me back on the show.
No, you're welcome. So let's start by asking you about Dear Dyslexic. Could you tell us what that is, please?
So the Dear Dyslexic Foundation was established in 2015. We originally started with podcasts, and then we've grown into a national social enterprise with charitable status. So we work across the country running training. We also do a lot of advocacy and awareness raising. We work with government in doing that, and we provide a lot of peer support, would probably be the third most important aspect of what we do.
So peer support, who are your peers? Who is asking for support? Is it mostly ladies or students, or tell me about your people?
Our people have grown significantly over the last 5 years since I started DDF. We support mainly, our primary area of focus is young people and adults, so those 16 and over, so we don't work in the child space. We really support young people transitioning into school or higher education or into the workplace, and then supporting adults that are already at work that are needing support. I should also mention that we do research as well, which is a massive component of the work we do. And through our research, we've set up a PhD support group for people with dyslexia who are doing PhDs. It's the first of its kind in the world that we know of, and we've got 20 people globally that have joined our group recently. So we do peer support in different ways. We run support groups like the PhD one we started, and we have a closed Facebook group. We also have a 1-800 number that people can dial in and get peer support through, and then we also run mentoring programs as well, so a peer mentoring another person that has dyslexia.
It sounds like a very much needed service, and it's great to hear that you are, and that service is in so much in demand, but you are someone who has also managed and been successful in a journey through a PhD with dyslexia, and I know that you were near to completing a really important piece of work when I saw you last. So tell me what's happened with your studies and your research.
So I'm at the tail end of my research now. I've submitted one paper for publication, and we're waiting to hopefully have that sitting under review, so fingers crossed it gets published soon. And I think I was a little bit selfish in starting up the PhD group, because I'm part of the group, not just as a facilitator, but also a student there to learn and listen to other people. And we're so lucky that we've got Dr. Judith Hudson supporting and facilitating that group. She does a lot of work with students with dyslexia who are doing their PhDs. So we're super lucky to have her. My research is focused on young people and adults, their mental health and wellbeing. So that's the paper we're waiting to be published now. And then the second component has been looking at their workplace experiences and their lived experience as an adult. And so at the moment I'm writing a paper from dyslexic employees' perspective of what it's like to work in an Australian workplace. And the third paper I've just started drafting is from the employer's perspective, and it possibly could be one of the first type of papers published. I haven't been able to find anything where we've had the employer giving their perspective of what it's like to work with someone with dyslexia. And my fourth one, fingers crossed it all goes well, because it takes time to write, is really around dyslexia and is it a disability or a superpower? We're having, there's so much conversation and narrative around dyslexia as a superpower, or trying to look at that strength-based approach, particularly in the workplace. And so I really wanted to get an understanding from people with dyslexia's perspectives of, did they see it as a superpower or a real strength, or did they find it more of a disability? And so I'm really excited about that piece of work, and I hope to get that out by the end of this year. Hopefully, fingers crossed, at least drafted, ready for publication. So nearly there.
Fingers crossed, indeed. And I should be signing up to read that, because that's an area that interests me very much as well. And I've done a little bit of work with employers and with dyslexic adults who are trying to find their way into the workplace. And you're right, there is a tension between the skills that you have as a dyslexic person, which might be bigger picture thinking or the ability to see patterns, great negotiation skills, for example, or let me just think of another one.
Normally we're very good at problem solving.
Thank you. Problem solving and connecting those dots. So those are all fabulous skills that are highly in demand. If you have someone on your team, you probably want a dyslexic person on your team who can help support you with those areas of thinking. But at the same time, there is this tension with people who often need others to perhaps enable for them, either with reading or just supporting in certain situations. So if you were speaking to somebody now who is listening to this and thinking, gosh, this could be me, what would you advise them? Who would you advise them to get in touch with and talk to?
Well, within the Australian context, normally if you're an adult, a neuropsychologist could assess you. So I think looking at options for assessments, but also just coming to us and having a chat to us to see what support's available. Not everyone wants to get an assessment, so it could be that you just need some strategies to help you manage in the workplace. For others, an assessment is really important. And we always say to people, the reason an assessment is important is then you're protected under so many different acts in the workplace, so the Discrimination Act, the Human Rights Act. And so by having that piece of paper, you're able to then get some additional, or you should be getting additional support in the workplace. And if you're not, then you're being discriminated against. So, but the challenge is, how do people fund that assessment? And that's the difficulty we're in at the moment, is we really advocate for those assessments, but when you don't have the funds, it's really challenging. So I'd suggest people just touch base with us and we can talk them through the different options available.
Thank you, Shae. That's really important information. So let's move on and talk about teacher training. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I'm aware that in the UK, newly qualified teachers are having a pretty bumpy time of it because they've not been able to get into the classroom in the UK. I'm aware that we have greater numbers of dyslexic teachers coming through into the system, which is wonderful, really great. But also that this particular period of time has presented some challenges for them too, because they've not been able to get that mentoring and support that they would have previously had. So I wanted to ask you if you've been talking to teachers in Australia.
We have spoken to teachers, and we've spoken to parents as well around the struggles with COVID and the support needed at home for dyslexic children. What we have found recently is that we've got teachers coming out of university with their certificate ready to work, but they have to sit a literacy and numeracy exam that's run by a different peak body. I don't know if it's the same in the UK, whether you need to do something like that. But what we're finding is there are a number of teachers that have managed to get through university, and then they go to sit this exam and they're not passing because they're struggling with their dyslexia. They're struggling because of the timing, like the time it takes to do the test. I think it's 65 pages or something long, and they've only got 2 hours to do it. And that the reasonable adjustments just aren't good enough for what they need as people with dyslexia. It's not being considered at the moment. And so we have been in conversations with ministers. We've written to the peak body in Victoria around some of the challenges that teachers with dyslexia are having. And so I think we're in for quite a long battle around how we can better support dyslexic teachers. If you've come through and you've qualified, then there must be some way that they can get additional support. And, 15 additional minutes or 20 minutes is not enough. I mean, we have to be practical and realistic. And some of these tests now are online because we're working from home. So there should be more reasonable adjustments, whether that's text-to-speech or the ability to listen to the questions rather than having to read them. There's so many things that could be on offer that at the moment it is not. And so we're looking at how we can better support our teachers coming through that do have dyslexia when they get to that exam.
Because
and unfortunately,
otherwise you're going to exclude lots of amazing people from the teaching profession. Yeah. And you're right, in the UK, we do have the numeracy and literacy standard tests. Yes, they happen after you've committed a year of and plus of teacher training and gone through and started your first placements. I became a teacher prior to these tests happening. And I'll tell you my story briefly, and that is I'm dyscalculic. Mathematics just does not happen in my brain, really. And when I went to apply for my teacher training, I had to say, I'm so sorry, the highest grade I have achieved is a D for my GCSE maths, and I don't seem to be able to improve upon that. And I had a long conversation with a lady at the university that I trained at, which was Brunel University, and explained all of the great things that I'd been doing and how determined and passionate I was about going in to be a teacher. And she sat with me and she said, you will have to do your entry test for mathematics. However, I will provide you guidance and support before you go in and do that test. And she said, you know these things because you've been doing this at evening class, it's fine. And she just reassured me. And I got through the test and I got my pass grade. Without the support of that teacher, that professor, I don't think there's any way I would have gone into the teaching profession. And I needed that human support and kindness and understanding. Clearly, she saw something in me and she recognised that I would be a good teacher, for which I'm very grateful. But that's not an opportunity that other students are getting. I think that was quite a special moment in my career, really, where that recognition happened.
Yeah, I mean, I started I left school and wanted to become a teacher, and I couldn't even pass the end of year exam for maths and English. So I was like, something doesn't seem right. And it wasn't many years later I was diagnosed with dyslexia. But even in my master's degree, I'd failed counting twice. And I finally had this lecturer and I said to him, this is my third time. I've always had tutors. I don't know why I keep failing, but I desperately need to pass this because I'm nearly at the end of my master's degree. And I would go in every week. He would sit through and go through all the sessions with me. He spent so much time with me. And at the end, he let me do an oral exam rather than a written because I could explain the answer, but when I wrote it down, I'd get my decimal places mixed up. And he could see it. He could see me translating that information incorrectly. So he knew I knew the content. But again, that's very rare to happen. And it's outside the formal support networks. Like that was his choice because I was open and upfront at the beginning and said, this is my third time, I've struggled so much. And there's just no informal support like that anymore. And for me, it seems so wrong that you should get through your whole degree and pass it and have come out with this huge debt, and then to not be able to pass this one exam when you've got a disability, to me is disgusting. I think it's so wrong. It's not fair on so many levels. And so I think the systems need to change. I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Australia to be supporting not just dyslexic teachers who are just graduated, but also across a number of industries where those people have done their degree and then they're expected to sit an exam without the appropriate reasonable adjustments or accommodations. And I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Australia to better support people that have done so well in getting their degree with dyslexia. It's such a huge achievement and they should be so proud of themselves, and to be then put another barrier in front of them like this is just really, really disheartening. So I hope in time we're able to make some change around it.
I hope the change can come and that people recognise that if you are dyslexic and you have been successful in a course. You have done it with tenacity, and it has been tiring, and you have kept going despite feeling that perhaps sometimes the challenge is almost beyond your capacity, and that's fabulous stuff that needs to be recognised. Really, it takes a lot of skill to keep going when you're dyslexic and studying.